Student Volunteer Ireland National Volunteering Week 2025 celebration. We are thrilled to host Dr. Christina Seary, who's going to share with us her research on students as partners through student mentoring. And we're really delighted that she could join us today to share with us a little bit about the research that she has done with colleagues and published in this area. We're very passionate about students volunteering and in particularly through mentoring. So take it away, Christina. We're delighted to hear from you.
Great. Thanks so much, Lorraine. I'm just going to pull up my slides and share them. So today, as Lorraine was saying, I'm going to be talking about a piece of research that we did around students as partners in peer mentoring. So I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher and a research scientist in the UCD School of Psychology, and I did my undergrad in UCD as well. So I volunteered to do this piece of work during my undergrad, so it's really nice to kind of come back and reflect on it now. Post PhD it was actually the stepping stone I had into research. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But I'm going to be talking through the paper we published back in 2021. So I have a QR code at the end that you can scan to find this. But what I'm taking is lifted from the paper. So you can go back and revisit that, and feel free to send me any questions as well. And the contact author is Sarah Sullivan, if you have any more additional questions. But as I was saying, this piece of work was really my first foray into research, and since then I've completed my PhD last year. I'm obviously working as a postdoc, and really committed to staying in academia as best as I can. But it was really lovely actually getting introduced to the world of research through this kind of little program. I'll talk about the methodology, but to kind of chat through my experience, it was really that I was in the second year of my undergraduate in psychology, and coming to the end of first year, that was it. And the invitation to sign up as a peer mentor went around to everyone. When I did my degree, and it was a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, and the social sciences, and the College of Social Sciences and Law really reformed during my first year. And so they changed the BA in psychology to a BSc, and there was a lot more emphasis on kind of creating a culture of social science as they were making that big shift. So they started this peer mentoring program with the aim, and Dr. Niamh Moore-Cherry and Dr. Sarah Sullivan are really interested in teaching and learning, and really embrace this idea of students as partners. So they wanted to create a program of peer mentoring that was led by the peer mentors. And as part of that process, they invited the peer mentors to participate in research and go beyond just kind of being participants, but actively be co-researchers. And that's what we called each other. There wasn't, throughout this research project, there wasn't any dynamic of supervisor, supervisee. It really did feel like we were welcomed and a part of the process, and really shaping it as well. And originally it started off that we built a report, or wrote a report, the kind of group of researchers. There was 8 of us peer mentors who were co-researchers as well. We had workshops with Niamh and Sarah where we sat down and we were literally writing sections of the reports together and chatting about that and brainstorming together. And then at the end of it, myself and Andrea approached Niamh and Sarah and asked, could we work with them to get a journal article together? So the process of putting together the report is really valuable. And at the time I was coming to the end of my second year then in my undergrad, and applied for a research internship in DCU. And it was because I had this experience in an introduction into qualitative analysis that I was able to get that internship in DCU, and that snowballed into all the research experience I was able to grab, really grab during my undergrad. And then I went from my undergrad straight into my PhD. So this piece of work was so formative, and I think I suppose my journey really speaks to the value of embracing students as partners across, volunteering in universities, but just generally in universities, how, we can really give opportunities to students to grow, really. And I ran into Neve there in outside the coffee dock in UCD the other day, last week on Thursday, and I mentioned how I was doing this webinar, and she was saying, that she had seen on Twitter when I shared that I passed my Viva. She was like, I just get such a rush of pride every time I see your name pop up, because like it's just been such a lovely journey. So yeah, I think if that's all that I impart today, it's that, this keyword of sense of belonging really did, as cliche as it might, or cheesy as it might sound saying it out now, like I really did feel like I belonged. And I remember like Neve giving me a reference for my IRC application when I was going for the scholarship, and just how actually like really nourishing this piece of work was, and really built up my self-confidence as a researcher. So I'd really, really just encourage that partnership approach wherever it can be adopted. So to give you a kind of sense of why we did it, I suppose I gave a little bit of context already, but fostering and enhancing student engagement within the higher education and further education context is critical for a range of people. From a policymaker point of view, kind of very like, KPI focused, encouraging student engagement supports a range of performance indicators, or has been linked to higher levels of progression within courses, higher levels of retention, and all of these are critical for core funding. So it's like that, if like a kind of mediation analysis, if we have like, students and then student outcomes, that student engagement is a really big part of that. And also, thinking about it from the perspective of uptake with counselling services or student supports, like we really nourish a sense of community through student engagement. And then from an academic and student perspective, fostering student engagement creates a more satisfying learning experience, a greater sense of belonging, like I was talking about, and responsibility to one another. So cultivating that sense of student engagement, or enhancing it, can help students feel more active within their learning as well, and like taking steps to be autonomous in their learning. In recent years, there's been a more collaborative approach to higher education institutions and higher education generally, and this has led to a recent focus in research and in policy around students as partners. So really this idea of co-creating the student experience, or co-developing education. In the UCD School of Psychology, there's students on the meetings for like postgraduate courses, undergraduate courses. We also have students on the Athena Swan committee that we have. So there's an undergrad student, and while I was in my PhD, I was the postgraduate rep. So really just trying to engage with students to hear their voices, and it's not in a performative way. It's really actively like, okay, like how can we address the hierarchical imbalances or power imbalances, so a student can speak out in these committee meetings, or help to co-develop or feel empowered to do that. So the students as partners approach embraces this, so it goes beyond just consulting students, so kind of considering students as like participants, or like we'll ask them their opinion and then decide behind a closed door how we bring that feedback on board. It's actively bringing the students into the room to collaborate and co-develop education or volunteering programs. And so it's a collaborative, reciprocal process to contribute equally. And the collaborative, reciprocal process here is what's really important. It's, really important to make students feel valued, to gain that in depth of contribution. So thinking about peer mentoring, and I know Lorraine was mentioning the kind of importance of peer mentoring as a voluntary activity for students. And apologies, I know this is like a text-dense slide, but peer mentoring is widely practiced to support the transition from second level to higher education. It's quite a common practice to support new students coming in. And peer mentors are vital in supporting this transition. We know that that period of transition is especially difficult. And then if there's any differences of needs, like for students who might be neurodivergent, that transition can be even more difficult. So having someone who's been through it, a bit of peer support really can be really, really supportive in easing that kind of like that the fear that comes from entering a university for the first time. So peer mentors offer or share their understanding and knowledge about the university as a whole and the academic course. I remember meeting my peer mentor when I was in first year and like being introduced to Google Scholar. You know, I'd never even heard of the idea of Google Scholar before, but actually she sat down with us and showed us how it worked. And it meant that I was in a much better place for when it came around to working on my essays. Peer mentors can act as a link between students and faculty. This can be really supportive if, you know, a student feels really uncomfortable raising concerns, or several students do, and they can like talk to their peer mentor to get advice. And then actually what's come up in the literature is that peer mentors are often emotional support to students. So it's not just, or at least the literature would show that it's not just the pragmatics of getting like accustomed to university, it's also helping ease that anxiety, those nerves, the stress. In UCD, it's a peer mentor to a peer mentee group, so several students, and even having several students in a little group to start can be really helpful for making friends and connections, and makes that first lecture feel a little less overwhelming. The research has mostly focused on the benefits to incoming students. So some of the findings would suggest that there is greater integration and connection with their university through the peer mentoring program. There is some evidence that it can improve average grades and fosters a sense of community. For the limited research on peer mentors, there's evidence that there's benefits of friendships with their peer mentees, new skills, especially valuable for like career skills, and then that there can be challenges as well, like a big thing being the pressure on peer mentors, or the additional responsibilities they're taking on while being a full-time student, and many of the students will have part-time work or additional personal responsibilities. So the context for the current partnership approach that we adopted was, as I was saying, the UCD Social Sciences Peer Mentoring Scheme is a program to support orientation to a new social sciences program where the first year intake is over 500 students. In 2018, social sciences peer mentors were recruited by open application to design orientation for their own peers. So the aim was that, or what we did was that we did a training where we were told kind of these are the main things you should touch on as part of your orientation, like like a tour of the campus, that sort of thing. But otherwise there's flexibility. So they gave us suggestions for what kind of icebreakers we wanted to do, how we wanted to get to know one another, what we felt was important on the tour. The orientation program for the new social sciences program was devised to be ongoing, so that it would start during the formal orientation week, but continue throughout the semester. So peer mentors were expected to continue to meet up with their mentees as much as possible, or as much as necessary. All peer mentors, so there were 66 who volunteered, were invited to join a research team to co-research the adoption of a partnership approach. So this kind of like the peer mentors as a partner in shaping their orientation or their peer mentoring experience. And the two types of partnerships that were part of this program were students as partners with faculty and staff, and then students as partners with one another. So partners with other peer mentors, and then partners with their peer mentees. So in terms of our research questions, as co-researchers kind of considering this partnership approach to peer mentoring, we wondered, or we asked, what were the expectations, experiences, and challenges for the peer mentors? And what were the potential challenges and outcomes of adopting this partnership approach to peer mentorship? So of the 66 peer mentors who were invited to participate in the research, 49 agreed. So we started off with a survey, a baseline survey with open-ended survey questions before peer mentoring training. So this is really to get a sense of what did peer mentors expect the role would be like, what they thought would make them, or what they thought a good peer mentor is, what kind of qualities they expected a peer mentor to have. And then we had reflective diary entries. So the kind of plan for the research was that throughout the trimester, peer mentors would update their reflective diary. So it's like an online portal after every meeting or just every so often, and share kind of how they were finding the peer mentoring process. We had 35 people complete the diary entry after orientation, but after that, participation dissipated quite a lot. So there was very little data by the end of the trimester. And so to address that, we hosted focus groups. And myself and another peer mentor facilitated the focus groups rather than faculty or staff. And again, it was that aim of that kind of partnership approach, diluting the hierarchical imbalance a little bit, making students feel like they could really share their experiences. And as you'll see, some students kind of did reflect on finding the partnership approach a little bit difficult. And so it's really helpful having that facilitator also be a student and also be a peer mentor to kind of build that rapport quite quickly. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we had these like brainstorm sessions to analyze the data. So we adopted a thematic analysis approach, and we did it as co-researchers. So all of us would have been very new to data analysis anyways, and then especially qualitative analysis. So we got a guide from Niamh and Sarah to talk through how we could approach this, and we were breaking it down, and we'd go off into small groups and kind of interpret it and then speak to one another about what we were noticing. So it was actually really reflective co-creation and co-analysis. So in terms of some of the themes that we found, the first major theme was the perceived benefits of the peer mentor experience. And there were several different benefits that we had. The primary one that came out the most was that enhanced sense of community. So very much in line with that previous research that shows that peer mentoring increases a sense of belonging and actually increases that sense of engagement with the university. So what was interesting, sorry, this first sentence should say, with other students beyond their peer mentees. So the research would support that peer mentors make a lot of friends with their peer mentees. And actually what we found was that peer mentors made friends with other peer mentors. So it kind of built a sense of confidence approaching other students across courses. So there was examples of people kind of, you know, during that orientation feeling a little lost or not quite sure where to go. So like approaching another peer mentor, even buddying up to peer mentors. So there was a bigger group that they were going around together, and then they could kind of bounce off each other when they had questions. But then also having more of a network outside of that orientation week to tap into, and having made more friends. And it also created this sense of being more relaxed and less stressed because you are part of a bigger support group and part of a bigger community, and feeling like you had a kind of a new identity as a peer mentor. So one of the quotes that came up kind of emphasizing this, I knew people through the peer mentoring program, I knew faces, and I had interacted with a lot of them. So if I really needed something, I could go like, oh, hey, you're in the same class with me. Can I ask you a favor? Just the fact that you know the people around you is much more relaxing and less stressful. And there was also a sense of enhanced community with university staff. So really highlighting this kind of the value of that partnership approach, right? So students talked about how certain staff members really helped smooth the process of engagement between the mentor and the university, that there was a staff member they could go to ask questions or to help if they were feeling a little bit lost. Or I know there was some staff members who helped peer mentors organize events. So I know a few peer mentors took their peer mentees out for bowling, and the staff had a pool of funds there for that kind of event. So it was really supported to go out and do something, and actually you could share your ideas and have that supported. For some peer mentors, however, that the kind of like close connection with staff could create a sense of obligation or felt a bit challenging at times. So they were like kind of, because they were getting all these invitations to reach out and organize events or, you know, use the pocket of funds that were available, they were feeling pressured. So like this person said, it felt sort of pressured, like, we want you to organize this. Someone else talked about how they sometimes felt that they couldn't ask for help, or that they were almost expecting to have been given the information in order to be able to answer questions to their peer mentees. And so this does just reflect the kind of the power dynamics that will be there even within a partnership approach, that it's really like you can engage students and really try and encourage them, but it can still feel like like this is a bit surprising to me, or yeah, just it catches them off guard and then creates that sense of, oh, I have to say yes. And actually, as I'm speaking, I'm thinking that this probably reflects the need for a wider partnership approach, that once we kind of introduced it, it felt like a surprise or an unknown to students. And so if it was more integrated throughout, then it may not feel as pressurized. And then some other benefits include personal growth. So the peer mentors discussed gaining confidence in themselves and in their ability to use their newly acquired transferable skills. So things like communication, showing leadership, and how that translates to outside of a university context. Being given responsibility for developing their own orientation schedules and activities enhance the students' decision-making capacities. So, you know, not just being given a timetable and told to follow that, but actually really shaping it could be exciting. I remember, like, I was bringing students around, and I spent a huge amount of time in the veterinary science building because there was a microwave in there that was way easier to get to than the psychology Newman building. So showing that, and actually it was like fun and playful to sneak into the veterinary building. So having that, yeah, being able to build a rapport in a way that feels really natural because you didn't have a strict timetable, or you could do it in a way that felt good for you. And it also helps students learn to practice flexibility and adapting to change when things didn't go the way they planned. And so a quote here to emphasize this: being a peer mentor made me become much more comfortable and confident in myself. And then a big part of this was developing leadership skills. And having the ability to apply these leadership skills and experiences outside of the program. And many of the students were motivated to look for more opportunities to keep improving themselves. So, you know, I looked for the research internship kind of off the back of this. Lots of people talked about having more opportunities within their university. So being a peer mentor opened up opportunities for a number of the students to progress into more prestigious roles within the university. Like students considered roles to be prestigious if they were paid. So I suppose that's another element of thinking about student volunteering and this kind of peer mentor partnership is, and Lorraine, I know you were mentioning this earlier, that sometimes students feel their value needs to be recognized, and that's often monetarily or with vouchers or something like that. So certainly in the data we had, students considered it more prestigious or kind of like a level up to be a college ambassador in paid roles. So a quote to kind of showcase these skills: even if you didn't do anything, probably just pass it off as a peer mentor definitely looks good on the CV. It gave me a bit of gratification for helping other students when I could, and it also led me to being an ambassador as well, which is a paid job at University College Dublin. I think you have to be extra active to get the other thing, but it gives you access to other opportunities as well. So the peer mentoring program being a stepping stone into growing their skills more, even connecting deeper within the university, or having it as something for your CV. And then our next theme was expectations versus experience. So we were interested to see, did people's views in that kind of baseline survey of what they thought the role was going to be match up with what the role actually was? So in terms of perceptions of what peer mentoring would be like, students considered excellent mentors to be leaders, enthusiastic, have lots of knowledge, Some peer mentors felt that they did not necessarily have all the information they required to be an effective mentor. So kind of a gap there maybe in the training. As I was saying earlier, the partnership design meant that there was an expectation that students would seek out as well as receive information to share, but this might not have been articulated clearly enough. And again, it's kind of the importance of setting expectations, not only for peer mentoring, but expectations for that partnership, being really explicit as to what the dynamic of students as partners would be, or how, what exactly, just the expectations of what they'll be expected to do. And it's also a new dynamic that they weren't expecting, this kind of partnership approach. So versus, maybe being given the syllabus, it's very different. And students emphasize the importance of being passionate about being a peer mentor, kindness and reassurance. So a quote here, I learned that there was a lot of info that I don't have, which could be helpful. Staff were a huge help in terms of finding out info I didn't have. So an example of someone who sought out, kind of really engaged in that partnership design of seeking out for information. So as you'll see, people perceived it to be that kind of quite emotional support that did come up in the literature before, kindness, reassurance. And in reality, people talked about how the lived experience of being a peer mentor was actually very pragmatic. So this is quite different to previous research. It could reflect the students as partners dynamic versus because students were maybe the onus was on students to provide that pragmatic information versus providing it as part of the orientation program that became the peer mentor's role. So kind of answering very specific questions about the course or the university versus being an emotional support. And the peer mentors had very altruistic motivations for engagement and really wanted to build a relationship to mentees. So for some, it was actually really disappointing that it was much more a pragmatic role. So a quote here, I think, yes, you might maybe give them a warning that you could get the negative reaction that should also be there that wasn't portrayed at all. So a negative reaction as a peer mentor from your peer mentees. And just like in any role, really, if you have an expectations that things can go wrong to a certain extent, if you're aware of that, it's a lot less disheartening to have it happen. Otherwise, you might feel like you're the only one because everyone else in the mentor group is going to talk about what went well, but the ones that it didn't go well for aren't really going to speak up. They're probably not even going to come back and be present. They're going to dwindle off. So acknowledging as part of kind of introductions as a peer mentor that it might not be what you expect, and the importance of naming that so the peer mentors can say it. And what came up as a surprising theme was the emotional aspects of being a peer mentor. So many mentors reported that they experienced unexpected challenges in dealing with their own emotional responses. So there was disappointment and feelings of rejection stemming from the mentor's failure to establish a relationship with their mentees. So not getting that friendship with their mentees and kind of having an unfulfilled desire to perform an altruistic role because the role ended up being so pragmatic. It wasn't the kind of emotional support that they were hoping they could give. Peer mentors strived to create friendships with their mentees, but often encountered apathy. So mentors wanted more from their mentees versus the opposite. Often in the research, people talked about mentees expecting too much from mentors. And the rejection that they experienced had an impact on some mentors' sense of self and their abilities. Some mentors were very regretful and actually blamed themselves for their mentees not being enthusiastic. And previous research has shown that actually mentors are vulnerable to rejection. So they are putting themselves out there wanting to help. So you kind of have two contrasting quotes here to show the different ways peer mentors responded to this emotional reaction. It's just like recognizing that your mentees don't actually need that much. It's like you are there just in case, and that kind of blows your self-esteem a tiny bit. But then maybe you can get used to it. Just coming to terms with the fact that maybe your mentees don't exactly want you to be their friends. And then I was really happy with my group. Only 2 people didn't engage too much, but that's their fault, and I gave them ample opportunities to join in. They just weren't interested, which was perfectly fine. So we had several mentors talk about, feeling like they should have done more, or is their fault that their mentees didn't engage enough? And then we had kind of the opposite, where people were like, well, it's not my fault. I gave opportunities. I did what I had to do. So it comes back to that setting expectations within the partnership, saying like this could happen, and that's on your mentee if they're not that engaged. It's not your personal responsibility. So the implications of the research for higher education institutions. So our findings show that there's a good fit between partnership working and the development and delivery of peer mentoring programs. Student partners taking on the mentor role have the opportunity to work in an engaged and collaborative way with other students, faculty, and staff to co-create experiences for their peers. And learning from the experience of peer mentoring and the process of being a partner in peer mentoring is relatively easily transferred to other contexts. So very supportive for the students in their self-development. There's implications for the design of high quality peer mentoring programs. So as I've been saying throughout this presentation, clear expectation setting should be a critical element of the peer mentoring training process and of the students as partners process, like even recruiting students to committees, that kind of thing. Recruitment processes should attend to the motivations of students for mentoring that go beyond financial or remuneration. So not just emphasizing, look, this is going to be really good for your CV, or student peer mentors got offered a headshot as part of the UCD program, but actually emphasizing, connection to the university, because that's what did motivate students in the first place, is those altruistic, wanting to create a good experience for other people, or not having had a good peer mentoring experience, so wanting to kind of give what they didn't get to other students. So emphasizing that the peer mentorship is an opportunity to, really connect to the university. And support should be provided to help peer mentors deal with the emotional labor associated with peer mentoring. So using that partnership model with staff, expectations for peer mentees as well. So for new students, actually clarifying what they'll be expected, that they are expected to engage with students who are giving up their time and resources to support their transition into university. So thank you very much. I'm sorry if I went too fast there. Hopefully the timing was all right. And the article is there. You can find the references I cited, and feel free to send me an email if you'd like to know questions. We can obviously take some now. But yeah, that's wonderful. I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christina Seery. That was so fantastic to hear. And I'm Dr. Lorraine Tansey, the Programme Manager for Student Volunteer Ireland. And if people would like to follow up with any questions or resources, it's studentvolunteer.ie. So I've